of today, session 5. Starting at 2 p.m. Yes, please take your seats. We are starting the next session, now at 2. Session number 5. So colleagues, this session is called The Future of RD&D, Perspectives on Key Global Technology Development Needs. And the moderator again for this session is Mr. Peter Schnurringen from the Future Clean Tech Architectures, FCA. Peter, floor is yours.
Alex, thank you so much, and welcome everybody again back to the Global Innovation Hub. It's a pleasure seeing you. Those people leaving now, there will be more coming in a minute. We've seen it before, and it will be like this today as well. That's my clicker. Thank you, Alex. So it's a pleasure being back. We had a very productive session this morning on innovative renewables, highly innovative renewables. And today we want to talk about a collaborative effort we have conducted with, or have performed in collaboration with UN Climate Change Technology Executive Committee, TEC. It is most often abbreviated. And we would like to present you some preliminary results of a global survey on RD&D needs. So the run-off show would be the following. Our R&D coordinator at Future Clean Tech Architects, Ms. Leonie Brandt, will give you an overview of the survey results, which we've compiled for you. And then we have an exceptional panel assembled here. One panel member is replaced by an equally talented and eloquent panel member. And I will introduce them to you in a second. But first of all, I would like to give the stage to Leonie Brandt to present the results of this global survey we've done. Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. It's really great to be here today, and I'd also like to take the minute to say a really big thank you to the tech. Your collaboration on this has been invaluable, and it's been a great experience. And so without further ado, I'd like to give you a little bit of an overview of the key takeaways that are important for the discussion today. Not all of them, unfortunately, we don't have the time for that, but on the key stakeholders. So there we go. The survey was developed in order to identify future needs and the priorities in accelerating RD&D in high-impact emission reduction technologies. And based on the 2022 IPCC report on mitigating climate change, we chose 12 different technologies for the survey, 6 of them more mature, 6 early-stage technologies. We'll be taking a look at which ones those were a little bit later. And we asked respondents to rank them in the order of which they think is the most important, the priorities from 2030 until 2035. Hi, come in. And to get a little bit of an overview of whether there's big differences between different regions and between different countries. We asked them to do this not only globally every time, but also for their own country and the country that they work in. And we not only wanted to know which technology areas do we need to be promoting on, focusing more work on, but also who are the key stakeholders to facilitate the necessary changes, where are the areas in which innovations and startups need the most support, where are they failing, and what exactly are the barriers and enablers that can facilitate this. And so together with the tech, we then disseminated the survey to 307 respondents from 59 countries, representing all regions in the world, particularly strong participation in developed economies, and we disseminated this to regional and national policymakers. We disseminated it to innovators and to researchers, and got pretty good feedback on this by doing open questions, multiple choice questions, ranking questions, to make sure that we got the full depth and scope of their expertise. And so first I'd like to give you an overview of what will be probably most important for the discussion today. So who are the key stakeholders to facilitate the needed changes? And you can see here a little bit of an overview, which is sort of the combination of open answer questions, of multiple choice questions, and these ranking questions. And one thing is very clear when you take a look at these Financial support is a very big problem and enabler, if that is possible. So over 80% of the respondents said that financial support was a key element for successful RD&D, but also political buy-in. And this is something that then spread throughout the whole survey. Those were the two main enablers and barriers: financial, but also policy, bureaucracy, and political support. And the public sector, through all these questions, through all professions, even when we excluded the answers from people working in the public sector, was identified as the key stakeholder for facilitating RD&D, with 73%, but also 71% of the respondents said that currently public sector is the biggest roadblock in facilitating RD&D. So this is one really big, important key takeaway, and I'm very interested to see what the discussion will tell us about that. The importance of the public sector was not only in the policy sphere, but also very much when we asked them what role should the public sector play in the financial sphere. So this is a really important takeaway in the sense that if political buy-in, if political support is the biggest roadblock, and so is financial, but we want the policy sector and the public sector to also provide financial stability and early stage financing, that's a really interesting combination to discuss later on. We also wanted to know, at what point do innovators, do startups need help? Where is it that the public sector, in this case, these key stakeholders, should start helping with? And we can see here that large-scale deployment, I'm afraid there's a mistake in the slide, it's not supposed to say finished, but again, financing and later stage financing on a global scale are the most important innovation stages in which RD&D fails and in which innovations and startups fail. This was one of the questions where we saw a very big difference between developed and developing economies. When we take a look at the respondents from developed and developing economies, we see that the risk of failure shifts to early development stages. So early stage financing and then financing later on, which will be also hopefully an important aspect of what we can discuss later in the panel. And then we wanted to know, okay, so this is where they're failing, but why are they failing? What are the barriers that are causing these innovations and startups to fail? And when we take a look at the global responses, we see that institutional and economic issues are really high, and so are social cultural barriers. When we take a look at the difference between the respondents from developed and developing economies, we see that institutional and economic barriers are still definitely there. But for developing economies, the technological barriers are much, much higher than they are for developed economies, and the social cultural barriers are much lower than they are, which tells us that as research, development, and deployment increases, the type of barriers change. And we really need to take another look at that, at how we can learn from countries where we already have more RD&D, and what can we use these experiences that we're making to apply them to developing economies in the future. This is just a really quick look. It won't be the focus of our discussion today, of the respondents in the areas for more mature technologies, which they consider to be the most important for developed economies. Fuel switching in industry was by far the most important tech sector in which we need to increase RD&D to 2030 and until 2035. That's different for developing economies there. The focus is much more on solar energy and energy production in general. But the one takeout and stand away technology throughout the entire survey was the importance of energy storage. This stayed the same for all professions. This stayed the same across all regions and countries. It is mentioned in open answer questions, in multiple choice questions, and ranking questions. Energy storage is one of the top priorities that we should be focusing our efforts on. Here you can see the difference in developing and developed economies. Storage is very important until 2030, but becomes even more so important until 2035, with clean electricity generation being more important in the shorter term. For developed economies, storage stays the most important, with decarbonizing industrial processes such as cement and steel production. So the key takeaway from this is energy storage as a priority across all sectors. You can see here we also excluded the answers from people working in energy storage and energy generation. Didn't make a difference, stayed the #1 priority across the board at all time. And I think with that, here's an overview of the key takeaways of the whole survey. We will be providing the slides later on if you'd like to take a look at that, and the survey will be published as well openly. I'd like to give it back to Peter so that you can introduce our fabulous panelists.
And fabulous they are. Leonie, thank you very much for this overview. Leonie has also been conducting the activity. Yes, feel free to applaud at our end. Thank you. So, you've heard the takeaways. You've seen what this group of participants came up with in terms of priorities, things that are neglected. Let's hear it from people who work on R&D, on setting priorities, on cross-border collaboration. And for that, we're really pleased to be joined by 3 experts today. And the first of them is actually not Stig Svenningsen, whom you see on the picture, because he's still bound in a negotiation. He can't make it. But we're so pleased to see his representative from UN Climate Change Tech team. Actually, she is the team lead for a climate tech subdivision at UN Climate Change. Her name is Dava Gungaga, and we would like to ask you on stage. Bava, first, thank you very much. Please take a seat. Next, we have the Chief Partnership Officer of the federal agency, German Federal Agency for Disruptive Innovation. You might think such a thing exists. Yes, it does, and they're doing a great job. The abbreviation of the acronym in German is SPRINT, S-P-R-I-N-D, and we would like to cordially welcome Barbara Diehl to the stage. Thank you very much. Please have a seat. Last and certainly not least, somebody who has supported, or whom we've collaborated with already 2 years ago in the global call by UNIDO when we did a joint clean tech competition with an award ceremony in our hometown in Remscheid. He is the Chief of Climate Technologies Innovation of the Climate Technologies Innovation Unit in the Division of Decarbonization and Sustainable Energy at UNIDO, the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, and his name is Alois Posefukufa Mlanga. Please have a seat, Alois. Great seeing you. And with this, I'll come over to you because it's not so nice talking from here. I'll turn a chair around. And I would like to address the first question to Bava right away. Because, Bava, you've been conducting this effort or supporting this effort which we've taken. It was actually the second survey we as Future Clean Tech Architects did. We released the previous version 2 years ago through the World Economic Forum's blog format. It received a lot of replies, and as we discussed very early this year, there was the idea that one could do something like this in collaboration. So the question would be, what, in your view, is the vision of the role the TEC, the Technology Executive Committee, had in supporting the technology development and transfer for this RD&D activity?
Thanks, Peter. Hello, everyone. Great to be here. Thanks for that question. To give, I guess, an overview, we have to start a little bit on why is the UN Climate Change Secretariat engaged in this activity? So if you go and read the Paris Agreement, and in Article 10 of the agreement, this is stipulated there that accelerating and encouraging innovation, it is needed as a response for climate change and economic growth and development. And in responding to this, the technology mechanism and the framework under the Paris Agreement has decided to conduct work on this area, specifically on promoting innovation and RD&D. So under this activity, when we talk about the technology mechanism under the UNFCCC process, there are 2, I would say, expert bodies under there. One is called the TEC, the Technology Executive Committee, and the other is the Climate Technology Center and Network. And both of these 2 bodies have been looking at this topic in the past and current work. This has included work on technologies and NDCs, also developing knowledge products and good practices and lessons learned, and also work on national systems of innovation. Last year, the technology mechanism launched a joint work program. And this was a significant milestone, as this was actually one of the first joint work programs in over 10 years of such a mechanism existing. And this work program was guided by science, what the IPCC tells us, and actually in collaboration with FCA on this survey, we took a lot of also guidance from the IPCC reports on this to develop this survey. And there's an explicit activity under the tech which really looks at this, and we'll be looking at the role of incubators and other accelerator programs in the participation in developing countries on approaches to RD&D. So the survey, which was just presented by Leonie, provides guidance and insights onto what is actually happening, what our developing country needs also in this area as we go forward. So with this survey, we are actually looking to address some additional areas. We have seen the key messages of key areas that have emerged, so this is definitely going to drive the work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bava. I mean, looking at, maybe if I may follow up with one question that would lead over to Alois in this case, looking at the tech and looking at formats, institutions, groups like this is a massive leverage in the end. I mean, information that's being shared in these groups and that delegates agree upon or member states then agree upon can maximize their impact if there's good ideas coming in very quickly. So that's a role that UN Climate Change and also UNIDO are taking in bringing these groups of states together, decision makers from ministries, delegates at conferences and so forth. Alois, if you look at this through the lens of your daily work, what do you take looking at these, what do you take from such preliminary results or first summary of results? Do you see this reflected in your work as well? Would you agree with what the participants came up with, or do you have a different opinion on some of the aspects?
Thank you, and I'm honored to be here. Thanks to the tech and also FCA for inviting us. What is my daily work? I think I have a very exciting job because we look at what we do in the form of creating new clean industries. We look at R&D issues around how do we support homegrown innovation, how do we support entrepreneurs so that on one stage they can transform their innovations into enterprises, but also to bring those enterprises to scale. So on a day-to-day basis, we interact with governments. From a policy perspective, we interact with the entrepreneurs or somebody who just discovered that there's something here. There's a possibility to do something here, but they don't have an idea on how to transform that technological innovation or business model innovation into an enterprise. We also interact with project developers who are looking for their first $1 million, $5 million, $50 million. They want to develop a solar park, let's say in Tanzania. So it is a very sort of cross-cutting across the technology valley of death. A lot of things I think that you mentioned there are relevant to the work that we do, in the sense that policymakers, I think, are the key in setting policy directions, in setting clear milestones, in creating space where entrepreneurs, where innovators, where the private sector can actually engage and set direction on where they want to go. But those policies, should not be made in a vacuum. Policy making should be actually a process where you engage the private sector, bring them on board to say, where can we go collectively? Because this then talks to how do you leverage the public funding to attract private investment into the technology development process. We have also seen a lot of partnerships as a way to ensure that governments and the private sector, they start working collaboratively around advancing technology innovation. We are seated here in Dubai. There are a lot of examples of public utilities. Dewa, Mazda, ADNOC, they are public companies that set up challenges to entrepreneurs, to innovators, to actually develop new products that helps those public utilities to improve the provision of their services. In some of the sectors, the classical utility perspective is that they see innovators and entrepreneurs as competition. But we need to change that mindset to say, if I am a utility in a developing country and I'm only providing electricity to 20% of the population, how do I see innovators and entrepreneurs, or how do I transform the research that is coming from public institutions into entrepreneurs and innovators that helps me to deliver on my mandate? So it is inherent in the strategic interest of a utility to say, can I go to the market and develop challenges, invite entrepreneurs to help me deliver on my mandate? In some of our programs that we are working on, we are actually going to utilities, which are an arm of the government, right? To develop these challenges, to structure these challenges, and ensure that they start attracting entrepreneurs and innovators, and also, in a way, start informing research institutions to say, this is the direction that we want to go. If you want to reach 100% electrification, I will need more mini-grids of this type. Can we now galvanize other institutions to start researching around what kind of mini-grids, how do we use them, how do we make them viable, and then attract private sector? So the findings of this report are very relevant to the work that we do in trying to push entrepreneurs across the innovation value, across the valley of death.
Thank you. And you're mentioning two aspects, but I think very relevant. We also saw this morning, one is the ecosystem. You say it's not just the public sector, of course, but the public sector is embedded in an ecosystem. We also heard this morning in a contribution from somebody from the European Commission saying we need the accelerators. The weakness we have, for example, we in Europe, I'm speaking now, is we don't have accelerators as they have in the US. I would like to take your remarks and hand over to Barbara. Now, Barbara, you're trying something that's really hard. You're like the thorn in the system as a disruptive agency within one of the most bureaucratic countries in the world. And people from Germany know what I'm talking about. The question is, how can we unleash the potential? Leonie has guided us through the results, and we've seen in this picture with the flash in the middle, maybe I'll get my pointer and I'll bring it on. How can we unleash the positive aspects the public sector can play, embedded in an ecosystem that then allows the innovators to grow?
Yes, so thank you very much for that question, and also thank you very much for the survey results, which to some extent have given some weight to what we have always been sort of working on, and when we were designing our work. And for everybody in the room, you may be entirely and graciously forgiven if you haven't heard about Sprint before. We are still a kind of sort of new-ish kid on the innovation block, so only started in 2019. And we are trying to be, let's say, the pirate in the Navy, right? Trying to square these two worlds and focusing on focusing on the innovation projects that have that breakthrough potential. So we are firmly and squarely set in the so-called funding the valley of death phase in the innovation pipeline. So that when the projects come out of, let's say, basic research, and you want to push them onwards on that innovation, let's say, trajectory, but you're still facing a phase which is incredibly hard to fund with private capital because it's still extremely R&D heavy. It's still very risky. It's unvalidated. You need to get to some sort of proof of concept. So this is basically where we come in. But specifically focusing on those, let's say, technology areas where we see the biggest levers, where we see the biggest breakthrough or potential for breakthrough. So we are having these thematic calls like for long duration energy storage, for carbon dioxide removal. We will have one coming up early next year on critical raw materials. And this is how we are trying to let's say, energize the innovator community around these moonshot topics, really, that are incredibly hard to tackle. And where we, quite frankly, need all the help that we can get from the private sector as well as from the political sector. There's a little bit of an internal joke within the agency, because when we all got started, we said, okay, the first disruptive innovation of the Agency for Disruptive Innovation is the Agency for Disruptive Innovation, and trying to find the sort of the wriggle room around, you know, policy rules and regs, and try to sort of not break them, but bend them maybe creatively, and trying to find new ways how money can be deployed in an agile and a fast way, so that innovators are not busy, that innovators are actually busy with innovating and not with filling out forms and writing reports.
We at Future Cleantech Architects love the fact that you're located in the Valley of Death. That's why we get along so well, I think, with all of your colleagues. And I'd like to follow up with a question, first to you, Barbara, and then to the others. Let's get a little more specific.
Yeah.
The task, I think, is fully understood. And for those, again, outside Germany, the Bundestag, the German parliament, has just passed legislation. It's sort of a law of freedom, Sprintfreiheitsgesetz.
Sprint Freedom Act.
Freedom Act, very good. What specifically, to all of you, the question, would make your life easier in scaling innovation faster? And as you've just given the example, Barbara, it would be great if you could share a view first. So a couple of things have been changed, at the federal level at least. Now you have completed the first challenges. We followed the Elders Challenge and others. Now, if you're thinking 2024, 25, what needs to be taken? What would be next steps?
Well, I mean, what we would love to have is more conversations, and actually more willingness on conversations, how we can leverage the power of public procurement for innovation. I do think we see a lot more willingness from policymakers to engage with that, but I think that's pretty much a result of the fact that we are coming out of 4 years of crisis upon crisis upon crisis. So I do think policymakers are now more willing and more open to engage around things like market shaping initiatives, but they don't know how. I mean, that is, I think, where they also need a lot of help to kind of understand how these mechanisms can work. We're at the moment trying to prepare a kind of a prototype around that, trying to engineer an advanced market commitment for the area of broad spectrum antivirals. It's all obviously in the, so that we're better prepared for the next pandemic, when the next pandemic comes, because we know exactly that whatever promising technologies that we are funding within the agency, they will fall off the cliff when they come to proof of concept, when it comes into clinical validation, because no pharma company is going to fund that stage. Because we all know that pharma companies only fund the stuff where they can actually see a market at the end of it. And we don't know when the next pandemic is going to come. So we need the policymakers to sort of engage in saying, okay, so if we made a commitment of actually buying this, if it works and when it's ready, then that will obviously then give a signal to the private sector to say, like, okay, there's a customer at the end of it, I can sell this. And that can, I think, mobilize incredible amounts of capital that we just need. We saw it on the slide. I mean, where do they fall off the cliff? It's when it comes to large-scale deployment.
It's a very good point, and it points to the power of public procurement. We're just actually in discussions with two ministries who are thinking about combined demand-side, supply-side funding that includes procurement as an element where it hasn't been used yet. Very good point. Thank you very much. And I've somehow lost the pointer or this clicker, because I would love to show the slide that you're referring to. But coming from your comments, Bava, I'd like to ask you, because you're coming across in your work innovations and innovative approaches, policy approaches from all corners of the world. What would make your life easier in bringing the message across, or identifying the best ones, maybe?
Yep. Great, thanks for that. I think definitely from our side, we're looking from the UNFCCC Secretariat at a very global perspective and trying to take some of the great ideas and innovations that are out there to a lot of developing countries where, you know, things are emerging and starting up, and there's a lot of opportunity. to leapfrog in certain areas. So how can we get this information out? How can we share it, bring countries together and share this information? So actually, such forums that this definitely help, but then taking it from this to actually action on the ground and actually delving a little bit further on what are some of the areas we saw. You're seeing this slide here as well on the different innovation stages. So how to help countries, move the needle to have some transformative change as well. So getting this out, getting it onto the ground. We are looking at certain, partnerships with others, such as UNIDO or others in our UN family to help us support on this as well.
Thank you very much. And this is basically the perfect hint to what I wanted to ask Alois anyways, because since you're with the Climate Technologies Innovation Unit, you, same as Bava, come across very different requirements in regions of the world, which is by the way what we've also found out in the survey, to some degree in the answers. Now, I imagine sometimes you need to customize your approaches. So you're working with a country, say, on a startup or something in Latin America. They have different requirements than somewhere in East Asia, probably. What would make your life easier?
Thank you. Am I allowed to mention 3 things?
Yeah.
Okay. Building, strengthening, and connecting ecosystems. We take it for granted that there is that valley of death or that development stage, people are always available. Enterprises in developing countries or entrepreneurs, they spend 70% of their time looking for money and 30% of their time building their business. It is not a given that if you get your 10,000, there's somebody who is ready to give you the next 50,000, the 100,000, 500,000. So there are a lot of gaps in the financing continuum. So we need to build and strengthen ecosystems in developing countries so that these entrepreneurs are informed on what is the next level of support that they can get, whether within the country or at a global level. Because we have a lot of accelerators that are accelerating companies off the cliff. Secondly, skills. Technology, someone who is an innovator is not necessarily an entrepreneur, right? There are a lot of people who are very good at technology, but they are just not entrepreneurs. We need to develop entrepreneurs. We need to with our incubators, accelerators, can we even have a requirement that you need to go to 3 or 4 accelerators before you get money? Because it is that skill of running a business that will ensure that you are going to be successful and you are going to go to scale. We have seen a lot of companies that have very brilliant innovations, but they just fail because this guy is a scientist. He is not a businessman. In as much as perhaps he may build a team, but we need people who have the skills of developing a venture. Then I think the last thing is, which I also talked about, is the issue of financing. Because of this sort of discontinuity in the financing, there's also talk now of having funds of funds, where depending on whoever invests in this, we have different kinds of financing for each stage, and intentionality in supporting companies at this stage so that we can see that this now at seed stage, they receive the 100,000. That bigger fund can invest when they go to early growth stage, and then they go to scale up. Because without that continuum in financing, we are going to have a lot of very brilliant companies in developing countries that just fail because there's just no funding. The ecosystem is not connected. Thank you.
Thank you, Alois. I think, Barbara, what you mentioned some minutes ago on the procurement as a tool, could serve in many regions of the world. An example that Alois has given, of course, the conditions in the countries and in the regions vary broadly. I mean, financial conditions, funding programs, but as we need to take up speed so quickly everywhere, and it does not really matter where, and solutions must be customized to world regions, are there things that generally work? So would you have, from the past years you've worked on this, Bava and Alois, can you think of solutions, hacks, tricks, tools, where you would say we need to roll it out globally, basically? This is something that basically always work to drive innovation harder.
Yeah, tough question. We haven't been at it for a very long time, so obviously the easy answer would be ask me again in 5 to 10 years. But
We will.
no, but what we are seeing is interesting, let's say, experiments around this whole idea of market shaping. And of course, you know, we are all wedded to this idea of like the free markets and the competition and all of that. And we have, you know, established institutions like WTO and so on and so forth. But I also think that, you know, outside of the European Union, there are large economies out there that have been doing, let's say, market shaping for a very long time, and who have deployed these sort of instruments that you know, on the let's say on the not so, let's say, on the not so elegant side, which are just, you know, point blank subsidies for stuff, and the others and more maybe around pricing, tax rebates, whatever, or just even state-owned enterprises, right? So in China, for example, I mean, there's no secret that, you know, the Chinese government props up a lot of the state-owned enterprises with government procurement and things like that. So I do think in Europe and when we're trying to further these sort of conversations at the European level or even on the German level, there's a little bit of an unease around that because everybody is so wedded to this idea of free markets and competition and not distorting competition and so on and so forth. But I do think they also realize that sometimes markets need a little bit of help because they do fail occasionally, and and what we see is that they do fail in areas where we need the biggest breakthroughs, which are climate, which are health, and I think this is where we are now seeing a little bit more of an openness to discuss that. Where I'm saying, talk to us again in 3 years' time. I mean, the whole, let's say, the initiative around the broad spectrum antivirals we're currently developing with folks at the University of Chicago, where there's a lot of, let's say, intellectual capacity around market shaping and all of that. They also help to bring the Frontiers Climate Initiative to fruition. So I do think there are really interesting experiments out there. Are they moving the needle? Let's see.
There's this saying, there is no free lunch. And we used to adopt it in our team sometimes, saying there is no such thing as a free energy market. Markets for electricity, for energy technologies have always been shaped, at least in the initial stages, by subsidies, by R&D measures, by procurement,
tax rebates, whatever.
All that. So I can very much relate to what you're saying. Maybe briefly back to Alois. Hearing this, what do you I mean, because you're also dealing in a field that Sprint has covered, that Bava and the tech have covered, which is capital intensive, long innovation cycle, clean tech. Yep. Clean tech, like long duration energy storage, in my view, is the perfect example. It takes a decade sometimes. It takes a lot of capital. It takes a lot of failures. We had innovators this morning, this is a generation example, but from wave energy. If you want to build 50-ton buoys in the ocean, you need a 12, 15-year development plan. You cannot do it within 3 years and then sell the company. So what works well in this space? Is there any of them? Coming back to my initial question, is there, what are the best practices, the best examples you can think of?
Thank you. I mean, I would be remiss to not bring issues that relate to the global south when you talk about the challenges with these difficult sectors. And I would want to sort of reflect on what we are doing with climate adaptation. Mm-hmm. Because it is a priority in the global south, and the issues that talk to climate adaptation from an innovation perspective tend to also relate to these difficult sectors. Mm-hmm. What we have seen in climate adaptation is that we need to bring entrepreneurs, governments, and the market, or the takers or the adopters of the technology in one room. Normally, the supposed process is that someone creates an innovation in the city and it goes to the rural areas, to some village and the like. What we have tried to attempted to do is to take the innovators and entrepreneurs and the government to go and meet people in the village so that they create solutions that are relevant to the pain that the people in the community feel and the exposure to the issue of climate. So I think there's a lot of need for a lot of patient capital in terms of some of these challenges, but intentionality around how do we create solutions. Markets don't always work. Markets, they always fail. I think there's needs for the government to create that market space, but also to be the initial mover. So what we have seen in climate adaptation is that we need intentionality, but also to create curated solutions that solve specific problems. And in a lot of those cases, we are able to get the government to be invested, because the government has a policy that we are going to support climate smart agriculture. But how do you do that? By creating innovation or supporting the emergence of innovation. So in the same thing, I mean, in the same light, I think that refers to the challenge, the challenging sectors like the storage, long-term storage, and of course, electrification, green hydrogen as a sort of storage medium for energy.
Thank you. And as you mentioned this, I'm just thinking of, we've been exchanging recently with a foundation in Germany. It's called Bertelsmann Stiftung, Bertelsmann Foundation. They've just completed a big study on how the energy transition, the digital transition until 2040, 2050 will transform the balance between urban areas and more rural areas within Europe, that is. So they've looked at Europe. And the results are quite surprising, and I'm sure we can share the results in the footnotes to the live stream or wherever, that the more rural areas across Europe will benefit from this. So that the example you mentioned, that the innovators need to go out to, like, the application, also the industry application is oftentimes in Germany, not in Berlin. It's in the Ruhr area, or it's in the southwest or so. So that we see this trend that innovators come closer to where the application see the problem, as you mentioned it, real quick. We have this tradition, and you're looking at your watch, I know we're running almost out of time, that's why I want to start the process now. We have this tradition, because we want to have specific results from our panels, to ask the fairy question. And the fairy question is, you run into a clean tech fairy, and she says, Alois, you have 3 wishes, but they need to be clean tech related, to do your job better. I would like to collect them with you also to maybe discuss a little. So if you have, it can also be just one wish, if this is the all-solving silver bullet, but if you could change something in your world of UNIDO, of running this program, heading this division, what would it be?
We normally say ladies first in my country. Do you do the same in your country?
Yeah, you know, this has come under suspicion recently.
Does the clean tech fairy work transnationally?
That's exactly.
Finance, but specific, accessible, available, and acceptable finance. Not
acceptable.
Only just acceptable.
What is acceptable? Please explain.
Which grows the companies, but not to kill the companies.
Okay.
Because if we are dealing with an existential threat, which is climate change, we need finance that is that addresses the need for us to address climate change at the scale and pace that is commensurate with the challenge. Available, it has to be available. We hear a lot of pledges, but we go to the people in the entrepreneurs in the village. They don't see that finance. They don't see the money. Of course, the other one is what
acceptable.
Acceptable. I mean, the terms have to be acceptable to the companies, because there are different kinds of companies. Companies that are dealing in hard-to-abate sectors, they need a long. I mean, they're going to scale. It takes much longer. Adaptation companies, the route to go to scale takes much longer. So it has to be curated to the needs and specific circumstances of the different clean tech sectors.
Okay. So these were 3 attributes to finance. 3 wishes to the fairy. Bava, may I ask you? Oh,
Yeah, and
either
not,
of you.
not the first time I've been called Barbara or confused. I guess if I were to go to the clean tech ferry, coming from a global process is actually, we really need to understand what are the needs, get feedback from the countries, as we've seen the results of the reports that have already been published this year's NDC report or the global stocktake technical reports. More action is needed. So to do that, we need to understand the needs. And of course, we know that technology and innovation is what is needed so that we understand it and we can get the message out that this is where more action is needed, and then links with what you're saying, where's the financing going to come from, also other capacity issues. So how do we really, like, I would like to see everything coming together so that, you know, the needle is moved in the next 5 years when we are going to again reconvene for such an event as the Global Stocktake. Thank you.
Okay, what I would ask for the clean tech ferry for two things at detrimental opposite sides of the innovation pipeline. So one is on the supply side of things. So which is that I would love more. I would love to see a whole scale change in R&D, not necessarily in university. Let's say in science and research to engage on a variety of level a lot more comprehensively with the translation agenda. So wishing for a very deep culture change that we currently have, compared to the one that we currently have. At least I can speak for Germany, but also I can speak for Europe. We had a whole panel on how to effectuate that sort of culture change for more translation in science and research. So that is one. And the other end of the fairy tale, no, not fairy tale. Is it a fairy tale? Well, let's see.
Hopefully it will become one. Yeah.
Would literally see, I would actually love to see an advanced market commitment pioneered by either one European government, just one European government, or maybe even the European Union for just one aspect of the clean tech related innovation pipeline. And I'd love to see it in long duration energy storage.
This is very interesting. So in case the ferry has a question, can you elaborate a sentence or two more on this? How would this look like, this commitment? How could that specifically be? Say Germany decides to take that on, or France.
Obviously, it needs to be designed well, right? So I do think we would need to have some very comprehensive input from obviously people who know this space a lot better than we do, of course. But to really think about what can a government do in order to procure the solution that comes out of it, out of a process of technology development and validation like the one that we are spearheading, and say, yes, we are going to buy this. So we are making a definitive commitment to buy this solution if it works, if it has been proven, and of course, if it has been developed to the stage where a government buyer says we need to deploy this at a large scale. Yeah?
Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry, it's a bit of an unclear answer because nobody really has designed ever a thing like that. Yeah, but if we could get one blueprint for that.
Yeah, and thank you very much, Barbara. And after all this is about structural innovation. So all this is about lessons that can be taken to and applied in other countries as well, or in other jurisdictions as well. And let me give you a quick wrap-up, or try to give you a quick wrap-up of what you said and what the ferry goes home with as homework. So we've heard about a couple of times it takes a change in culture of innovation. It takes a change in the ecosystem of innovation. How are these things handled? And ideally, and I know it's a tough road ahead, but there needs to be more cross-border collaboration. Because as of now, and we're seeing this a lot in Germany, it's even scattered across the Bundesländer, so the states of the country. Too much is happening in silos and in parallel. Resources are being wasted. So the bang for the buck perspective, I think, is extremely important in driving clean tech innovation. Finance, Alois, was one of your key points. The skills, supporting the innovators, finance that's acceptable, that's available. I think that was a very good point. The market shaping and the feedback culture and the iteration cultures as innovators make their way through the innovation stages, especially in the capital-intensive long innovation cycle parts that cannot be developed in any part of the world, obviously, but that sometimes are developed in pioneering regions and then be scaled elsewhere. But Barbara, you wanted to add something?
Just one thing, because I was at this very interesting panel this morning in one of the pavilions, and I think one aspect that people sometimes forget is that, you know, at some point technology development, major project management development. So scaling these technologies is not only a technological challenge, it's also a project development challenge. And
Please say it again. The last sentence. Say it again.
So sometimes the technology developers don't talk to the project developers, and that is also where some of these things fall off the cliff. Right?
Yeah. Definitely. And that leads us back to the ecosystem. I think without a strong ecosystem, and we also had it this morning in a session, interministerial coordination, bundling of resources. Bava, we're back at your end, basically. Scaling results, lessons learned, the most effective solutions quickly, internationally, it is going to be hard. Great. We would like to invite you next year to the Future Cleantech Festival, the ARC, which will take place for the third time, co-hosted by UN Climate Change again, and UNIDO's, ITPO's offices, I hope at least. They were with us the last couple of years. We're only talking about scaling cleantech, efficient tools, efficient, innovative policy tools as well, that give governments the best bang for the buck. And I would like to ask our kind audience here to give a warm applause to this panel, because I thought that was a very productive and enlightening discussion. And we look forward to driving clean tech innovation harder. Thank you very much.